There is a country in Europe smaller than some American counties where you can start the morning on a 2,000-meter peak, cool off in coastal water so clear it looks digitally altered, and end the day sipping wine on a hillside vineyard before the sun drops behind the mountains. Most people couldn't find it on a map if you gave them 30 seconds and a spinning globe. Stick around, because by the end of this, you'll understand exactly why that's about to change. And trust me, the final stretch of this journey gets stranger than anything you've seen so far. If a place this dense with wonder deserves a subscribe, this is the one, so go ahead and tap it now before we dive in, because you're going to want to come back for what's next. Let's start with the numbers, because they barely make sense once you see the place in person. 14,000 square kilometers. That's the entire country, start to finish. Smaller than some national parks feel on a crowded weekend, and yet inside that tiny footprint sits one of the most compressed, contradictory landscapes on the continent. The name itself hides the first clue. Montenegro means Black Mountain in Old Venetian, a nod to the dark. Forest-choked peaks that dominate the horizon in every direction you look. 70% of this country is mountain. Only Switzerland beats it in Europe, and barely. Those mountains didn't just shape the scenery, they shaped the people, forging a culture of stubborn resilience that has outlasted empire after empire. But here's where it gets interesting. 60% of the land is still blanketed in forest, and buried inside Biogradska Gora. National Park is one of the last untouched primeval forests left on the entire continent, where trees have been standing, completely undisturbed, for 500 years. Nobody planted them. Nobody logged them. They just kept growing while entire civilizations rose and fell around them, silent witnesses to centuries most countries only read about in books. And the water tells an even stranger story. Nearly 90% of Montenegro's rivers don't even originate inside its own borders. They flow in from neighboring countries, feeding a landscape that has somehow stayed almost entirely rural, while the rest of Europe paved over itself decade after decade. People here still live close to the land, in villages that feel frozen a generation or two in the past, where the rhythm of daily life hasn't changed nearly as fast as everywhere else. But don't mistake that slower pace for weakness, because that would be a mistake. For centuries, this tiny nation fought off the Ottoman Empire and the Austro-Hungarians, fortifying towns like Kotor and Herceg-Novi into stone strongholds built to withstand siege after siege. Then, in a twist almost nobody outside the region saw coming, Montenegro walked away from Serbia in 2006 without firing a single shot, becoming independent without ever building a standing army of its own, choosing instead to lean on NATO for protection while pouring everything else into tourism and conservation. Think about that for a second. A country forged by centuries of siege warfare decided its future didn't need an army at all. And somehow, after all that history, all that bloodshed, the culture that survived is one of the most relaxed on the planet. Meals here aren't just meals, they're events, stretched over hours, built around fresh local ingredients and slow, unhurried conversation. It's the kind of contradiction that defines this entire country. Warriors who became winemakers, fortresses that quietly became postcards. Now let's actually go there, because the coastline alone is about to prove every point we just made. Not many places on this list can compete with what comes next. The Bay of Kotor looks, at first glance, like someone airlifted a Norwegian fjord straight into the Mediterranean. But it isn't a fjord at all. It's something rarer, a ria, a drowned river valley where mountains plunge straight down into water, so still it barely seems to move. The coastline twists into the shape of a double anvil, and centuries ago a massive iron chain was stretched across its narrowest point just to keep invading ships from ever getting inside. That single detail tells you everything about how valuable this bay once was to the empires fighting over it. Roman, Byzantine, and Venetian traders all bled for control of it, and their fingerprints are still stamped across every town along its shore. Churches and fortresses fused into cliffs like they simply grew there. But we haven't even reached the strangest part of this bay yet. Tucked inside it is Perast, a town so small you could walk across it in 10 minutes, yet dripping with more history than places 10 times its size. Under Venetian rule, spanning from 1420 all the way to 1797, Perast became a genuine naval powerhouse, home to one of the region's earliest schools for training sea captains, men who would go on to command fleets across the entire Adriatic. Walk its narrow streets today, and you'll pass 16 churches and a string of grand stone palaces, quiet remnants of a wealth that once rivaled major trading ports across the Adriatic. But the strangest story here isn't even on land. It's just offshore, on two tiny islands that couldn't be more different from each other. The first, Our Lady of the Rocks, doesn't naturally exist at all. Legend says sailors found a religious icon resting on a rock in the bay, and to honor it, they started sinking old ships loaded with stones to build an entire island around that exact spot. And here's the part that still gives people chills. They never stopped. Every single year, locals still row out and drop more stones into the water during the Fashionata festival, physically growing the island by hand, a tradition that has survived unbroken for centuries. Inside the 17th century church that now sits on top, more than 2,500 silver votive plaques line the walls, each one left by a sailor who survived a voyage they genuinely thought would kill them. Just across the water sits its total opposite, St. George Island, quiet, wild, home to nothing but a hidden Benedictine monastery and an old cemetery wrapped in silence. Two islands, born from the same sea, telling completely different stories. But if Perast feels like a whisper, Kotor is a full roar, and the shift between the two towns happens almost instantly. This is the beating heart of the entire bay, wrapped in 4.5 kilometers of stone walls that claw straight up the mountainside behind it, a UNESCO World Heritage fortress town that has guarded this coast for centuries without ever fully falling. Inside those walls, the 12th century Cathedral of St. Tryphon rises above the rooftops, and the Maritime Museum keeps the memory of Kotor's trading empire alive for anyone willing to listen. But the real challenge waits above the town, and it's brutal. Nearly 1,350 stone steps climb the cliffside toward Fortress San Giovanni, passing the tiny Church of Our Lady of Remedy along the way, a pilgrimage site that has watched over exhausted travelers for centuries. Reach the top, and the entire bay opens beneath you at once. The water, the mountains, the medieval rooftops, all of it laid out like a living map you can finally read. The kind of view that makes every one of those 1,350 steps feel worth it. And once you're up there, you're still not close to done. Because just beyond Kotor, a road unlike anything else in Europe is waiting to test your nerves even further. The Kotor Serpentine Road twists up the mountain in 25 brutal hairpin turns, each one revealing a view more dizzying and more vertigo-inducing than the last, climbing steadily past the tiny village of Njagushi on its way toward Lovshan National Park. And Lovshan isn't just another scenic stop, it's sacred ground. 461 steps carved directly into the mountain lead to the Enyagosh Mausoleum, the resting place of Montenegro's legendary poet, philosopher, and ruler. Reach the summit, and you can see clear across to the sparkling Adriatic on one side and an endless wall of jagged peaks on the other, history and altitude colliding in a single, sweeping view. But just down the slope from that mausoleum sits something that flips the entire mood of this journey completely, because this next place holds a relic that sounds almost too strange to be real. That place is Cetinje, Montenegro's old royal capital, home to a monastery that claims to hold something extraordinary inside its walls, the right hand of John the Baptist, kept alongside royal palaces and museums that once ran an entire kingdom from this one small town. And if that sounds unbelievable, wait until you see what's carved into the cliffs just south of here. Ostrog Monastery doesn't sit on a mountain. It's built directly into one, wedged 900 meters up a sheer rock face above the Zeta Valley like something pulled out of a myth nobody believes until they see it. Founded in the 17th century by St. Basil of Ostrog, the location wasn't chosen by accident. It offered isolation for prayer and near total protection from Ottoman raids sweeping through the valley below. Getting there still isn't easy. Pilgrims climb steep mountain paths just to reach the upper monastery, where St. Basil's relics remain enshrined to this day, and the sheer difficulty of the journey only deepens the sense that you've arrived somewhere truly sacred. From spiritual cliffs to sun-soaked coastlines, the next stretch of this journey couldn't feel more different, and it happens fast. If you're flying into Montenegro, chances are you're landing in Tivat, and the descent alone is worth the price of the ticket. Mountains and turquoise water framing the runway the entire way down. Once a sleepy fishing town, Tivat transformed almost overnight thanks to Porto Montenegro, a glittering superyacht marina that now pulls in wealth from every corner of the globe. A short drive away, Budva's old town has been standing for 2,500 years, its cobblestone lanes and Venetian facades packed with an energy that feels almost electric compared to the calm of the bay behind it. Bars and terraces spilling out into streets that were built centuries before cars existed. And just offshore floats one of the most photographed places on the entire planet. Sveti Stefan, a 15th century fishing village that fishermen once called home, now sealed off entirely as an ultra-exclusive luxury resort. Locals nicknamed a nearby islet Hawaii Island for its pristine sand and glass-clear shallows, while further along the coast, tiny Sveta Nedelya, or Holy Week Island, hides a small church said to bring luck to any sailor brave enough to visit. Inland, the Church of St. Sava and the 19th century Austro Hungarian Kozmach fortress reward hikers with sweeping views back over the entire coastline below. But everything you've seen so far has been quietly leading toward a town with one of the darkest names on this entire coast. Herceg-Novi was founded in 1382 by King Tvrtko of Bosnia, and almost every conqueror who came after him left a mark on it somewhere. Roman foundations layered beneath Venetian facades layered beneath Ottoman minarets, an entire empire's worth of architecture fused into a single walkable town. Bougainvillea spills over narrow stone streets leading to Bella Vista Square, where St. Michael's Church blends Romanesque, Gothic, and Byzantine styles into one strange, beautiful structure unlike anything else nearby. Nearby stands Kanli Kula, a fortress whose name literally translates to Bloody Tower, once a fortress and prison under Ottoman expansion, now hosting open-air concerts where screams of the past have quietly been replaced by music. Up in the hills, Savina Monastery hides an 18th century church built on a site that dates all the way back to the 12th century. Its Baroque and Byzantine details wrapped in total silence and centuries of quiet devotion. A short hike away, the crumbling walls of Fort Spagnola still remember the battles fought between Venetians and Ottomans centuries ago. And just offshore, Mamila Island holds the darkest secret of them all, a 19th century Austro-Hungarian fortress that was later used as a wartime prison camp under Italian occupation, now being converted into a luxury resort, history and horror rebranded as five-star views. But even Mamila's dark past can't quite prepare you for what happened to the next town on this list, because this one gets even stranger. Stari Bar has stood for over 2,500 years, passed between Illyrians, Byzantines, Venetians, and Ottomans, each civilization layering its own architecture on top of the last, including a 17th century Ottoman aqueduct that still stands here today. But in 1979, an earthquake tore through the region, and much of Stari Bar was abandoned almost overnight, leaving behind ruined churches, shattered palaces, and a clock tower frozen at the exact moment its world ended. It's hauntingly beautiful, and it's also proof that in Montenegro, even destruction eventually becomes a landmark. From frozen ruins, the landscape shifts again, this time into something alive with wings and still water. But nothing quite prepares you for what comes next. Skadar Lake National Park feels almost otherworldly, the Krnojevic River winding slowly through emerald marshlands blanketed in water lilies as far as the eye can see, the whole scene wrapped in a silence broken only by birdsong. This is one of Europe's most important bird reserves, home to over 280 species, including the rare Dalmatian pelican, whose enormous wingspan has become the park's unofficial symbol. From the Pavlova Strana viewpoint, the river curls beneath jagged mountains before spilling into Skadar Lake itself, the largest freshwater lake in the entire Balkan region. Hidden coves like Karuch and Plavnica reveal secret caves accessible only by kayak, while sacred islands like Beshka hold centuries-old monasteries, and the crumbling ruins of Lysendro Fortress still quietly guard the water's edge, a silent sentinel nobody needs anymore. In the fishing village of Vranjina, traditions that predate modern Montenegro entirely are still practiced exactly as they always have been, untouched by everything happening beyond the marshes. And if you thought this country had already shown you its wildest side, you genuinely haven't seen anything yet. And just when you think you've seen the full range of what this country can do, it flips the script one more time. Dermitor National Park is where Montenegro turns feral. This UNESCO-listed wilderness in the north is carved entirely by ancient glaciers, jagged peaks, plunging canyons, and 18 glacial lakes locals simply call the mountain eyes. At its center sits Black Lake, its surface so still it mirrors the entire Dermitor Massif like polished glass. But the real showstopper is Shushko Jezero, better known as Devil's Lake, its blue-green water glowing against a barren valley in a way that feels almost unnatural to stand in front of. For those chasing altitude, Bobatov Kuk rises 2,523 meters into the sky, the highest peak in the park, and the climb is brutal, every step of it fighting back. But the reward is a view that makes you feel like you're standing above the entire country at once, mountains folding into mountains in every direction you look. At the edge of it all sits Žabljak, the highest town in the Balkans, a launch pad for hikers in summer and skiers in winter alike. And just beyond Dermitor's edge, the landscape does something even more extreme. But even Dermitor isn't the final act. The Tara River Canyon has earned the nickname Tear of Europe for water so clear it looks unreal, carved patiently over millions of years into one of the deepest canyons on the entire continent. Rafters tear through its rapids while thrill seekers zipline across the entire gorge for a bird's eye view most people will never experience in their lifetime. Spanning the canyon is the Derdovica Tara Bridge, an engineering marvel finished in 1940, and its story doesn't end there, because during World War II, partisans deliberately destroyed one of its own arches to stop enemy forces from crossing, turning an architectural achievement into a monument of resistance overnight. Beyond the bridge, the Piva River winds toward Piva Lake, a reservoir created in the 1970s when engineers dammed the river to build a hydroelectric plant, an act that submerged the original town of Plujine completely, forcing its entire relocation to higher ground. Today, the lake sits eerily calm beneath towering cliffs, a peaceful surface hiding an entire vanished town underneath it. And finally, in the far north, two mountain ranges close out this journey in the most dramatic way possible. The Proclitege Mountains, nicknamed the Ackhurst Mountains, stretch across Montenegro, Albania, and Kosovo, a raw, untouched wilderness of jagged cliffs and alpine meadows that feels completely frozen in time, almost hostile in its beauty. Right beside them, the Komovi Mountains rise in isolated, dramatic summits above rolling green pastures, their twin peaks, Kuchki Kam and Vasoyeviki Kam, dominating the skyline with some of the most breathtaking panoramas found anywhere in the entire country. So here's the answer to the question we opened with. How does a country barely 14,000 square kilometers wide manage to fit crashing mountains, fjord-like bays, glacial lakes, sacred cliffside monasteries, and entire earthquake-frozen ruins all inside one border? It doesn't just fit them in somehow. It stitches them together into one continuous, jaw-dropping story that most travelers never even bother to read past the surface, glancing at the coastline and driving straight past everything hiding just beyond it. Montenegro isn't small. It never was. It's simply concentrated, every square kilometer doing the work of 10. If this journey opened your eyes to a country you'd never really looked at twice before, drop a comment telling me which place on this list you'd visit first, and go check out the next hidden corner of Europe waiting for you right now.